Hello, everyone. My name is Jessica Casanova, and welcome back to Clinical Corner. Today's focus is shifting the activities department from task based programming to true resident impact. And what does that look like? We will connect participation, documentation, and compliance, and show how daily work supports quality of life and, most definitely, survey readiness. The goal is practical: clearer tracking, stronger resident-centered decisions, and a chart that can clearly explain the work. Let's take a few minutes to shift how we think about activities. From just completing tasks to showing clear, meaningful impact. This isn't about adding more to your plate. It's about strengthening the connection between what you're already doing and how it shows up in participation, documentation, and compliance. So, before we jump in, I want you to think about this. When someone looks at your documentation, would they truly understand the impact of what you do in activities? When we look at activities, it starts with participation, right? Not just attendance, but how the resident is actually responding. Are they engaged? Are they refusing? Are they benefiting? That leads us into documentation because what we document should tell one clear, consistent story across the chart. Anyone reading it should understand what happened and why it matters. And when those two pieces are strong, compliance becomes natural. We're not chasing it, it's already there. The evidence is clear and it's easy to retrieve. So today, we're really focusing on strengthening that connection from what you're already doing to how it shows up to how it protects both the resident and the facility. Now that we grounded the why, let's walk through what this session is really going to sharpen. We're moving from just counting activities to showing clear evidence of individualized, meaningful engagement. So in box one, first, we're going to review the findings. This is where we spot consistency gaps. But just as important, we protect what's already working. Not everything needs to change. So get box two. Then we build the upgrade. This is the practical part, tightening how we track participation and making sure care plans and documentations are aligned and telling that same story. And finally, we keep the end goal visible. Because this isn't just about documentation, it's about improving quality of life, right? Supporting behavior, following through, and making sure we're always survey ready. So, everything we talk about today will connect to these three areas: review the findings, building the upgrade, and keeping the end goal visible. Now, let's take a look at what we're actually seeing. And I want to start here. There can be a strong foundation in place. In many settings, we see programming, variety, staff engagement, and a scheduling structure. But the system doesn't always fully support the work. That's where this focus comes in. There are a few areas where the system may not be fully supporting what's happening day to day. We often see or may see inconsistency in tracking, limited use of one on one engagement when it's clinically indicated, and care plans that are maybe a bit too vague to fully reflect the actual work. And this piece is important: resident interests. If those aren't current, then everything we build from there can start to feel disconnected. So, this isn't about doing more, it's about tightening the connection between what you're already doing and how it shows up. The goal is to make participation measurable, individualized, and easy to retrieve. Because when that happens, your documentation becomes stronger, your care plans become more clear, and your work becomes easier to follow and defend. So, now let's talk about why this actually matters. When activity data is weak, it doesn't just affect one area, it impacts the entire system, the entire facility, that is. At the center of this is weak activity data, as you see on the screen. When we're not clearly tracking participation, everything around it starts to disconnect. So, looking at the left side, from a survey perspective, it becomes harder to show individualized programming. We know the work is happening, but the chart doesn't always reflect it. Moving to the right, then we start to see system disconnect. Log notes and care plans stop reinforcing each other, and the story becomes harder to follow. We also miss interventions. If we're not tracking patterns, we can't clearly see what's working or what's helping engage or calm a resident. And then ultimately, that leads to reduced engagement. Preferences are identified, but they're not always translating into action. So, this isn't just about documentation, it's about visibility. It's about making sure the care you're already providing can be clearly seen, followed, and supported. Now, let's shift into what good actually looks like day to day. This is where documentation becomes more than just a task, it becomes useful. We're not documenting more, we're documenting with purpose. For group participation, we want to capture three simple things. One, the offer, whether the resident attended or declined, and any patterns. Patterns matter. Are they declining mornings? Do they engage more in smaller groups? That's the kind of information that helps guide care. Moving on to one-on-one participation, this is where individualized care really shows up. What was the individ- what was the individual offered? Was their level of engagement, and were there any barriers, or did staff need to redirect? This is where we start to see what actually works for that particular resident. Moving on to independent activity, we're looking at what support was provided, whether the resident initiated or sustained the activity, and what helped it work. Because when a resident is independent, there's still a story behind that success. And this is the part that ties it all together. Daily tracking leads to meaningful one-on-one being provided. That gives us trends we can actually review. And then that data gets used to update care plans, guide interventions, and support the team, the whole facility. This is how participation tracking becomes something we can follow, understand, and use, not just something we complete. Here is something to think about. What is one thing you're already documenting consistently, and one thing you could start adding? Now, this is where everything starts to come together. The goal of tracking participation is not just to collect information, it's to use it. When we track consistently, we start to see patterns. For example, this resident attends 1 to 2 groups weekly, declines larger groups, and responds better in quieter settings. That's not just information, that's direction. Now we can respond to that pattern. We might offer smaller groups first, schedule consistent one-on-ones, and coordinate timing with nursing or therapy when it makes sense. This is what it looks like when documentation actually supports care. A resident pattern should point directly to staff action. And this is the shift. The point is not to collect more data. The point is to make the data usable. Now let's bring this into the care plan. A strong care plan should show the resident, not just the activity category. We start with preferences, what the resident enjoys or is drawn to. Then it's the strengths, what they can still do, what they respond well to. Then barriers, what gets in the way, whether that's the environment or behavior, timing, or even fatigue. And finally, needs. What support is required to make participation successful? When we bring those four pieces together, the care plan becomes specific and individualized. From there, we build goals that are clear and measurable. Participate 2 to 3 times weekly, receive one on one support 3 times weekly, maintain preferred formats. These are things we can track and things the team can follow. And then intervention should directly match what we know. Offer smaller groups or quieter settings, provide preferred independent materials, adjust timing based on fatigue or behavior. This is how care plans and documentation start to align. When the care plan reflects preferences, strengths, barriers, and needs, it becomes easier for the team to follow and easier to show the why behind the care. Now let's talk about one-to-one support, because this is often where the biggest opportunity is. When we think about who should move to the top of the one-on-one list, we're looking at residents who may not be fully benefiting from group programming. Residents who rarely attend groups need encouragement to initiate or have behavioral, sensory, or cognitive barriers, and also those who do better with direction or simple companionship. These are not residents who are non-compliant or not interested. These are residents who need a different approach. And how are we going to do that approach? One-on-one doesn't have to be complicated. It can be short visits around known interests, quiet, calming activities, reminiscence, reading, music, or spiritual support, even simple check-ins tied to mood or behavior patterns. This is where individualized care really shows up. And this is the shift. If a resident doesn't engage in groups, one-on-one is not extra work. It is the right intervention. Now, let's connect everything into one system. Documentation should not feel like separate tasks. It should function as one continuous story. It starts with daily logs, what was offered, how the resident responded, and any patterns we're starting to see. This is your foundation. Moving along to prognosos, this is where it starts to flow. This is where we capture meaningful changes, barriers, and any follow up needed. This is where the story starts to build. From there, it should connect directly to the care plan. Goals and interventions should match the patterns we're seeing, not just stay the same over time. And then at quarterly review, after you completed your MDS, we bring it all together. What are the trends? What worked? And what needs to change next? Each step should build on the one before it. Now, let's look at how wording makes a difference, because this is often where things break down. When we document something like attends activities occasionally, it sounds fine, but it doesn't actually tell us anything. It's not measurable, and it doesn't show frequency, format, or what's helping. Now, Look at the stronger version. Attends weekly, prefers one-to-one in smaller groups, responds better with encouragement and quieter settings. That tells us exactly what's happening and, more importantly, what to do next. This is what survey ready documentation looks like. It shows patterns, it shows what works, and it supports decision making. And every quarterly review should be able to answer three simple questions. One, what is the participation trend? Two, what approaches are working? And three, what needs to be adjusted? If we can answer those three questions, the chart tells a clear, defensible story. Okay, so let's zoom out and look at the bigger picture. Activities documentation doesn't just support programming, it connects to the entire building. So looking at the center of this slide, the, at the center of this is activities documentation. When it's strong, it becomes useful to every department. From an IDT perspective, on the left side of the screen, this supports collaboration. Social services can see barriers and strengths. Nursing can see routines and mood patterns. Therapy can better understand fatigue, timing, and even function. And there's a strong behavior connection as well. When we track participation clearly, we can help reduce agitation, improve mood and connection, and monitor how residents respond to the interventions. And all of this ties directly into survey readiness. When the documentation is clear, the evidence is easy to retrieve. We're not searching for it, it's already there. This is how activities becomes a key part of the ITT, not just a separate department. Let's close this out with simple, practical path forward. This is not about changing everything at once. It's about focusing on what will make the biggest impact first. Step 1. Implement the tracking tools. This is your foundation. Start capturing what's offered, the response, and patterns consistently. Step 2. Refresh resident interests and care plans. Make sure they reflect what is actually current and meaningful for the resident, not what was entered months ago. Step 3. Increase one-to-one support for priority residents. Focus on those who are not benefiting from group programming and need a more individualized approach. And last but not least, step 4. Strengthen quarterly summaries using trend language. Make sure your documentation clearly shows what's happening, what's working, and what needs to change. This is how the system starts to come together, step by step. Protect the strengths you already have while tightening the system around them. Before we close, I want to leave you with this. Activities are where life shows up. When we document participation well, we're not just showing what was offered, we're showing how it impacted the residents' daily experience. And that's the goal, making the work visible in a way that tells the resident's story. So, as you leave today, think about one next step. One documentation change you can make this week that makes that story a little bit more clear. Thank you. If you have any further questions, feel free to reach out. And I hope you all have a good day. Bye for now.